Hello, my name is Rose Gold, and it has been nearly a year since I had last recorded, but I am so excited to share Chapter 2 of By the Angel by TellTaleKael with you all. This chapter does not have any explicit content, but MPreg is a very large theme and will be for the rest of the fic, so you've been warned. Please enjoy. Chapter 2 The City. The rhythm of Blue's hammer falling was concise, the action mesmerizing. He considered the blade of the sickle he had been tasked with repairing, deciding it needed just a little bit more. He returned to the fire, pumping the bellows to help it heat once again. The flames rose with each pump, sending a wave of heat wafting over him. When the metal was molten hot once again, he returned to the anvil, hammering out the new joint that held the broken pieces together. Perfect. Taking the blade, Blue dipped it in the bucket of water beside the anvil, quenching it and solidifying the repair. The water steamed and hissed, the smell of metal and smoke reaching his nasal apparatus. A wave of nausea hit him with the smell, and he flinched, hammer falling from his phalanges. He reached to grab it, but it hit the floor with a loud clatter, the sudden movement and sound making his head spin. He gripped his skull, trying to will the pounding away. Blue? With a sigh, he pulled the sickle out of the water, testing the temperature. It was done. He retrieved his hammer and returned to face Alphys. I'm finished. All it needs is sharpened, and it will be good to go, he said. The corner of Alphys' eyes wrinkled with concern. That's the third time you've dropped something today, she said, crossing her arms over her chest. Blue winced. Sorry, I'm feeling a little off today, but nothing that will keep me from doing my most amazing work, he hurried to assure her. She didn't look impressed. I can sharpen the blade. Why don't you go wash off in the stream and get something to eat, she suggested. We don't have much left for today. But, he tried to protest. The look she gave him booked no argument, and he wilted. Okay. You have to take care of yourself. I can't have my best apprentice working himself sick. Listen to your body. He snapped to attention at her tone, saluting her. Yes, ma'am. Care commencing now. That's right. Keep that fire and care with yourself with all the passion you have. Yes. They continued yelling at one another until Blue felt better about taking her advice. The stream wound in and out of the woods, providing clear water for the village. It was nice and cool when Blue slipped in. He had chosen a spot where the stream curved back into the woods, so he was hidden from sight by the trees. Nothing felt better than floating in the stream after a day working the forge. The heat and sweat was swept away by the current, leaving him refreshed. The nausea seemed to drift away with it, thankfully. He couldn't afford to fall ill, not with the influx of tools needing repair at the shop. Alphys could do it, of course, but Blue tried to handle all of that sort of work so she could focus on her weapons. The hunters were always looking for new blades, swords, daggers, anything Alphys could make. It was a large chunk of her income, and Blue didn't mind handling the small repairs so she could continue her work. Sitting up from his reclined position, Blue made sure that his bones were clean before summoning his ecto. The difference in the feeling of water against his bones versus his pseudo-flesh never failed to make him shiver, but it was a nice shiver. He always made a point to clean his bones and his ecto when he had the time. Lowering his arms back into the water, he ran his phalanges over himself in a light scrub. He had no soap, that was reserved for a real bath, but he liked to be sure that he had all dirt washed away. It was when he leaned down to clean his thighs that he saw it. His ecto-stomach was slightly distorted by the flow of water, but he could see the shape of something through it. Nestled in his abdomen, glowing ever so slightly, was a tiny little soul. 8 days. It had been 8 days since the festival. Far too early for most monsters to tell, but there was no denying the proof when he could see it with his own eyelights. Trembling hands moved to press against his stomach lightly. Green. The souling was green. The color of kindness. The color of life. Life was growing within him. By the angel, he muttered, looking upon the soul in awe. A little one, conceived on the angel's holy day. A blessing. Stretch was going to kill him. That night, Blue lay awake, hands pressed to his stomach. He wasn't far enough along that he needed to have his ecto summoned at all time, but he couldn't bring himself to banish it when he was alone. As he looked into the darkness, he wondered, not for the first time, the name of the mysterious skeleton who had helped to create the little life inside of him. They had been a stranger for sure. Blue was certain he would have recognized a skeleton from the village or the surrounding area. so he had to have traveled to join in on the festival. That made it much less likely that Blue would ever be able to find him. Children born on the Angel's Day were considered blessings, proof of the life and creation the festival was all about. Sometimes both parents would come forward, sometimes it would remain a mystery of the masquerade, especially if one of the monsters was not local. There was a chance Blue would never know who the handsome skeleton was. As sad as the idea that they would never know their child was, Blue knew that he could love the little one enough for two. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to keep looking out for any familiar travelers who happened to come by. Luckily, the nausea wasn't very persistent, especially if Blue kept some sort of snack on him to eat while he worked. He suddenly had so much more energy and drive, like finding out about the souling had lit a fire within him. He wanted to give them everything they could ever want or need, so he had to be sure that he could make a proper living for them. They deserved it. He had yet to tell Stretch. Not that he didn't want to, he did. He dreaded the lecture that would follow, though he knew afterwards Stretch would love the souling just as much as he did. He would be a fantastic uncle to the little one. Blue would tell him he would, but he wanted to keep it to himself just a little while longer, just so he could continue to bask in the love he already had for the tiny little thing. Alphys most likely would have noticed that something was different if she wasn't so caught up in the bliss of being newly fasted to Undine. She was passionate about her work and Blue's training, of course, but Blue could tell as the day began to end that she was eager to return home to her love. He hoped that he would one day have that too. A love who loved him and the little one more than anything. Life continued, though, and he could worry about that later. Alphys was loath to leave Undine so soon after fasting, so she took stock one day inside. Blue grew eager. "We're low on supplies," Alphys said, eyeing their dwindling stock of raw metal. "We need to get another shipment scheduled before the harvest." There was always another influx of broken tools and orders for new pieces when the harvest came. It was a ways away, but getting stocked up beforehand was always a good idea. "I think my brother is planning on going to Waterfall soon," Blue said with bright eyelights. He gave Alphys a winning smile, and she scooped him up to rub her fist on his skull. "Fine, I'll send you with an order, and you can get it arranged," she said when she was done. Blue rubbed his skull, and he couldn't stop grinning. "I'll get everything you need," he promised. He rarely got to go to a city like Waterfall. Could count the number of times he had been on one hand. Stretch went more often for his duties, often bringing back a gift and fantastical stories. Waterfall was a day and a half's travel from the village. Blue and Stretch set off early in the morning, fresh nut cakes Blue had prepared the day before in their packs for snacking on as they walked. The morning was cool and crisp, and Blue couldn't stop the happy humming that left him as they made their way down the road. He didn't realize Stretch was watching him until his brother spoke. "You're in a good mood." Blue gave him a grin. "Of course, it's been 2 years since I visited the city," and he hoisted his pack higher on his shoulders. "It's been a while since we went somewhere, just the two of us." "I know I haven't been around as much." Blue shook his skull. "No, you've been doing so well with your duties, brother. I'm very proud of you. I'm not a baby bones anymore. You don't have to worry about me. I'm just saying, this is nice." "Yeah, it is," Stretch agreed. Blue looked at him. He wore his hunter's uniform, but one of his older, less formal ones. "What are you going to do in Waterfall?" "Have some supplies for the team, as well as turning in a report on what we found out about the demons." Blue shivered, remembering the oppressive aura that had filled the woods on that fateful night. "I see. What have you found out?" Stretch turned a grin on Blue that didn't reach his sockets. "It's nothing you gotta worry about," he lied. "Probably just a fluke that they ended up where they did. Demon summoning is risky, inaccurate business." "Oh," Blue looked down, scuffling his boots on the road. When would Stretch realize he didn't need empty platitudes and assurances? As a child, they had helped him to not fear the kinds of things his brother hunted. But he was a grown skeleton. He could handle the truth, and would rather know the kind of danger Stretch could be in for his line of work. He didn't say any of that, though. "Okay, if you say so. I've got to get Alphys' order turned in, and I was thinking about getting her and Undine a fasting gift," he said instead, resisting the urge to rest his hand on the stomach he didn't have summoned. The tense line of Stretch's shoulders relaxed, and his smile grew more genuine. "That's a good idea. I'm sure they'd appreciate it." "Yeah," Blue kicked a rock off the road. He would wait to tell Stretch about the sewing, just a little longer. The bustle of the city never failed to amaze Blue. There were so many monsters moving about, working, living their lives. The sight of all the different monsters and clothing, the sound of voices and clangs of work being done, the smell of various foodstuffs being prepared, it all blended together into a mix of sensation that assaulted Blue at a rapid pace. The markets were even busier. Blue's eyelids expanded, trying to take everything in as he and Stretch stood along the outskirts. He had to force himself to look at his brother when Stretch began listing off where he planned on being. Then, once I make my report, I'll be picking up supplies. Let's plan on meeting at the tavern this evening. We'll get a meal before we head home, okay? Blue nodded. Okay, I'll get Alphys's order done first, and then I want to see what kind of gift I can find. I'll meet you at the tavern afterwards, he confirmed. Stretch smiled and gripped his shoulder. Be careful. Keep an eye on your coin purse, and if you run into any trouble, find a hunter. Blue finished for him. I know, I'll be fine. Stretch gave him a patient look, squeezing his shoulder once again before heading into the crowd. Blue waited a moment longer, looking around and trying to figure out where he needed to go. Getting Alphys's order done was simple, since she had written exactly what she needed down for him and sent him off with the proper payment. Blue even managed to talk the merchant down in price a little, so he could get some excess material for the shop. The success left him beaming, chest puffed out as he exited the merchant's shop. Now that he was free to wander, he wasn't sure where to start. A smell caught his attention, and he followed it to the stall that was selling savory meat pies. His stomach grumbled, so he purchased one. It was warm and settled in his belly solidly, a kind of treat he could rarely get access to. Meat was hard to come by in a village such as his, and he enjoyed every bite. As he ate, he weaved in and out of the crowds, observing the market stalls and trying to decide what kind of gift to get his friends. The jewelry for sale was beautiful, but he couldn't see Alphys wearing any of it. Weapons were out of the question, because Alphys could make something much better herself. He spotted something perfect just as he crammed the last of his meat pie into his mouth. Across the market was a weaver's stall, and Blue caught sight of the most beautiful woolen blanket he had ever seen. The thread had been dyed in the brightest blues and green, such rich colors unlike any he knew. It would be wonderful on Alphys and Undine's union bed. Keeping his eye on the blanket, Blue began to work his way towards it. His happiness was so bright that he almost didn't notice the heavy pressure on his neck. Almost. It was not physical, that much he knew as he turned around to find no one there. No, it was the heavy weight of a hidden gaze on him, and the press against his magic. Someone was reading him, and he could not see the culprit, and soon the feeling faded. Shaken but determined, he picked up his stride once again. Reading another monster's magic out of nowhere like that was rude beyond measure. Such things reserved for healers or enemies in the midst of battle. He didn't know why someone would want to read him. City folk were an odd sort indeed. He managed to drop his indignation as he arrived at the stall. The blanket was just as soft and warm as he imagined, and he knew it had to be. It was a hefty purchase, but he had the coin saved, and it was more than worth it. He carefully, reverently folded the blanket and packed it away in his bags, complimenting the weaver on their craftsmanship the entire time. When he stood to replace his bags on his back, he felt the pressure again. Another reading? It was more insistent this time, and he whirled around, eyelights darting back and forth. There, a hooded figure watched him from the shadowed alley between two buildings. The pressure eased up, and the figure turned to retreat down the alley. Blue, before he could think better of it, darted after them. Once was rude enough, but twice? What did they want? He knew if he didn't at least try to catch up with them, he would worry. What if they meant ill towards him? He would be remiss to not be on guard. The alley led away from the market, towards the more residential district. The buildings were older, less impressive. Roofing became thatch instead of tile. Windows were open instead of covered in glass. Blue knew enough to know he had walked through a lower district, the area of the common worker. He only managed to catch glimpses of the dark cloak sweeping around corners, but he followed confidently. At last, until he rounded a corner and came upon a dead end. No figure in sight, just a stone wall. No, not just a stone wall. There was a door. He didn't know how he had seen it before, but it was suddenly there in front of him, and it was cracked open. Blue reached out, but before his phalanges could even touch the wood, the door swung open, and he found himself inside without remembering even taking a step. The inside was dim, lit by candles and a fire, but there were no windows to let the sun in. The wood flooring was old but well polished. Shelves lined the walls, filled with all manner of odd things. Dried herbs, jars of liquid, shining crystals. At the back of the room was a long counter, upon which stood a burning incense stick, filling the room with a smoky wood smell. Behind the counter stood someone. "Come in, dearie," a voice spoke. The figure removed their cloak, revealing multiple sets of arms and a rounded face with multiple sets of eyes. The spider monster beckoned Blue closer, and he went, walking up to the counter. You were the one reading me in the market." The spider monster smiled, revealing small little fangs. "Forgive me, but I could not help myself. You're carrying something quite interesting there." Blue frowned, glancing over his shoulder at his bags. "The blanket? If you wish to purchase it, I apologize." "No, not there," she said with a giggle. Leaning forward, she reached over the counter to rest her hand on Blue's stomach, and he didn't know when he had summoned it. "In here." Numbness settled around Blue, eyelight shrinking to pinpoints. "You... what? How?" Another fanged smile. "We Fae are sensitive to these things," she said mysteriously. As she spoke, 2 sets of arms began to retrieve items from her cloak, laying them on the counter. More herbs and stones, along with twigs and grasses. It was disorienting to watch so many hands moving at once. "Fae?" Blue repeated. He knew of the Fae. They weren't necessarily evil, just very tricky. "You are sensitive to pregnancies?" She laughed again. "Not just pregnancies. Those are a dime a dozen. But one such as yours is very interesting indeed." "What about mine?" Blue asked, dropping his hands to his stomach. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing." "Oh dear, you don't know, do you? That is strange." "What is it?" She looked at him with all 3 sets of eyes. He resisted the urge to squirm. "Monsters who lie with the supernatural are usually aware of it." Silence. Then, "What?" "Your child, dearie. They are only half monster. You weren't aware that you were taken by something not monster?" Blanching, he shook his head. No, they were skeleton, like me. Not anything... strange," he insisted. "How would you know? Look at me. I look monster, do I not? I feel monster to you. I am Fae. It takes skill and practice to be able to pick us out, and we aren't the only ones who can appear monster." Blue's eyelights sputtered out for a moment, and his skull swam. When they came back on, he gave the Fae a terrified look. "What are they?" he demanded. "My child, what are they?" "A child," she said simply. "Innocent, unaware. They have no guilt on them." Blue inhaled sharply. "I know that. They're so small and precious." "Then why do you ask?" "Because I don't even know how to take care of a monster child. If they need something but I do not know what, then I cannot provide for them." "You plan on keeping them?" "Of course." The Fae smiled. "Good." Some of Blue's indignation left him when he realized why the Fae had been asking. "Of course I will keep them. They are my child. Like you said, they are innocent." "Even if they were a vampire?" A cold chill swept over Blue's spine. "Are they?" "I don't know," the Fae admitted. "Their magical energy is unlike any I have felt. I cannot be certain what they are, only that they are strong, powerful. There are many beings that could create such powerful offspring, many of which mortals fear." Blue swallowed thickly. He had no idea what was growing inside of him. His hand rested on his stomach, soul throbbing. What was he going to do? It felt like he was cracking down the middle. His soul pulsed. The souling pulsed back at him. "I don't care." He looked at the Fae with determination. "I don't care what they are. They are my child, and I will protect them with everything I have." Relief spread over the Fae, Foster relaxing. "You are a strong soul, mortal. I believe you'll be just fine." She turned and reached up to one of the shelves to retrieve a packet of ground herbs. Bundling them up, she reached again and brought down a wooden slab. Bundling in twine. A symbol was carved on the face of the slab, and she placed the bundle of herbs on top, before wrapping them all up together in a neat little package. "Take this," she said, sliding it towards him. "There's a temple to the west of here. The priest may be able to provide you with more information. Show him this and give him the herbs, and he will help you." Blue picked up the package, holding it carefully. "Thank you. What do I owe you?" She shook her head. "Take it, dearie. I wish you and your young good fortune." There was a whoosh of air, and Blue found himself standing outside the wooden door once again, looking into the room. The Fae waved at him with 2 of her arms, leaning against the counter. "Safe travels, mortal." The door began to close slowly. Oh, and one more thing. Best not tell your hunter friend about this. They see no difference between full-bloods and halflings when they hunt. The door closed and disappeared, leaving Blue alone in an empty alley.